Hello everyone and welcome to a new edition of Low Code Café. Today we have episode 42. For those of you that are new to this Low Code Café, know that it's an event that we do together with our team and our community to share our knowledge and to learn from support, to learn from the team, and to learn from what's coming in Planted. This event is recorded, so all past editions you'll find on our YouTube channel. We'll post the links in the chat window in a bit. And usually it's about the same format. We have some community updates. We have from the trenches with Dale, our head of support. And then we look a bit of upcoming releases or current releases with Reza, Garrow, our head of product. And finally, the most important piece that everybody waits for is the hands-on low-code development, which takes the bigger portion of the time, and we build something every week. And today we are addressing a very interesting subject about security. For those of you that know Planted App, you know that you can implement a lot of security measures, and we'll demonstrate some of those today. But really, our purpose is that we want to make more of these features available out of the box. So just one small piece of news that I wanted to share with you. This weekend it will be Easter for for some part of the world, for the Orthodox, which means that our office in Romania will have fewer activities. So then there might be some delays, but our US office continues to work full time. So we hope that the disruption will be minimal. So then I will pass it on to Dale to give us some interesting stories that happen on the support channel in From the Trenches episode. Dale?
Hello, hello. Okay, so a couple of things with this today that I wanted to bring up. We have a new low-code feature focus was posted this week. We had a client that asked questions about our convert from HTML to Word action, which is a standard action in Planted App and available as an option within the DNN Sharp community. But it allows us to go directly from to take HTML and create a Word document. And so this short video covers, well, first of all, I used Word to actually create the HTML, which can be useful if you want a nicely formatted document. But we show an example of inserting images and text, a signature and a name signing a letter. But we create a Word document and then make it available as a download, and all that happens in, I don't know, 6 or 8 minutes. So very good encapsulation of some knowledge that I think would be useful. So I've posted the link on the chat to the low code feature focus, and there's a lot of other good content in there as well. I'm going to cover today talking about using, well, really my focus is on listings and grids and being efficient with the call to listings and grids. We had a client ask a question about SQL Select as a data source and why they couldn't use a particular feature, a particular advanced feature of SQL in there. And it turns out that's limited to SQL Advanced Queries. So exploring the difference between those two and the performance difference. And again, I continue to be amazed. I've been using the product for 5 years, and so there's these little differences that can make a big difference in performance. And you already see the summary: use SQL Select unless you need the advanced features. But I'm also going to talk about SQL Console because I used that to generate some test data. So with that, let me jump in. Within entities, I generated a table or an entity called random. And if we look at it and look at the properties of it, I simply have one custom property called random number. The purpose of this is that I'm going to generate, I have generated a large number of rows so that we can see the difference between SQL Select and Advanced SQL Query. When you're dealing with a small number of rows, both of them work well, and you don't notice too much difference in the performance. But when there's large number of rows, that's where it comes into play. So I'll just quick take a look at what was generated automatically by Plantin app. We have a randoms, and I have some entries in there. I have 66,000 pages of results for that, and you can see it came up quite quickly. So this is the default that was generated by Plantin app, the default table view. So I found on the internet this nice article about, and I've also included the link for this, but how to generate some random SQL Server test data. And so there's like generating millions of first and last names or random integers. And I jumped in on random real numbers. I just did a whole bunch of random numbers. This was somebody who wanted random numbers to test for temperature in the US. 95 to 105, 98.6 is normal, right? So I used this article to generate some data. And so I went into the SQL Console and used that. And here's the query I used where we're generating 5 random numbers. And so there's 5. If I wanted to do 10 random numbers, just this one parameter changes it from 5 to 10. So this is the basic query that I used to generate numbers. Came right off of that nice article. So I generated another, saved another query called generate random insert. And it's the same query, except I'm inserting into app random number, this random number that's getting generated. And at the bottom of it, I'm selecting the count of IDs of random to see how many I have. So when I run this, I see that I have 800,200 rows. And if I run it again, since I have 100 here, it'll bring it up to 800,300. So we have a good number of rows here and some good test data to look at. So the first query that I built a listing or a grid that has that uses the SQL select as the data source. And you can see it generates really quite quickly. I'm going to go through Page Builder and look at this, and we can just see that the data source is SQL select, and we're just selecting all rows from app random. And I've given it an ID column, and I'm sorting it by the random number and the ID so that we have some consistent order that's returned. So that's what's happening here. It's showing by the random number, and then when the random number is identical, that's sorted in order by the ID column. So then I did the exact same thing with this and with using SQL Advanced Query, and I'll refresh the page, and you can see that it takes quite a bit of time to load. So yesterday in my testing, what I found is that with the number of rows that I'm doing, it takes about 4 seconds for SQL Query and 8 seconds for SQL Advanced. It's quite a bit of, it's like a 50% difference. The difference only grows with the row count. So let's take a look. If we look at the SQL Advanced Query here in Page Builder, we can see the data source, SQL Advanced Query. It's exactly the same thing. I've got a little declare in there I'll talk about in a second, but we're selecting from app random and we're ordering it by the same fields. We've given it the same ID field. So it's really quite a simple query, but it illustrates the point. So it's the same query, and yet it generates it takes double the time. And it's because of all this, when you use SQL Advanced, it's loading it into memory, and it gives you some additional capabilities. We could put T-SQL statements inside here like I have, declare test. So I'm declaring a variable, and I could have done something with it. I didn't, but I'm just illustrating that we can add T-SQL into it and save it, and this query will run. And let's see, we'll update and refresh, and it'll load. If we, and of course it takes a few seconds because it's the slower version. If we go back to SQL Select and modify it, this version and try to put in that same, sorry about that, try and put in that same statement above, you'll see that it will not save. And so we'll go ahead and try it, and we'll get an error message when we try and save it. So you can't do advanced SQL things within here, but so long as it fits within the, as long as it's a basic select statement, I would definitely try to use this one. This is the one that's going to run faster using SQL select. If you need the advanced features, if you need to have T-SQL, then advanced query is going to work for you, just the cost is it's slow. So I didn't, in my years of development, I didn't know what the difference between these two were, and I've probably used them kind of interchangeably, but if you can possibly use SQL select, you're going to get a better response. So one final illustration, if I do a search for 98.6 here, we'll see how long it takes to come back, and it's really quite quick. If I go into search on this one and do the same search, it was taking me 20 or 30 seconds to get an answer back. It just is dramatically different. So pick the right tool for the job. So with that, I am going to turn it back to, we're not going to go to question and answer. We'll go to Reza and Manu. We today are talking the main topic about some security enhancements that can make things more convenient for your users and yet still be quite secure. So Reza, if you're ready, I'm going to let you jump in and take over.
Thanks, Dale. Yes, I am ready. And just kind of quickly, I wanted to touch on and give a quick look at, so we released 1.13 last week, and things have been going pretty good. There was a minor issue where a couple of dependencies weren't installing if you were on a brand new clean instance. We've corrected that and bumped up the download version of Plant and App, so that version that a couple people ran into issues with is not in play anymore. And if you do download the 1.13.59, it has none of the issues. And this was only happening if you were on a clean, never been installed before instance. Upgrades and things were working fine. And so 13's out there. I wanted to touch on, and we've kind of been, we're in 14 right now, and did a little bit of grooming and committing with the team. And just a couple of key notes in the next release. And I touch on this because in our hands-on part in a second here, you'll see where this feature would be killer and will be. And it's essentially as you have entities and workflows and tokens and things you're creating, particularly in workflows and entities, this list can get pretty big, and your naming starts mattering. Very, very easy when you have a handful of things to spot them and identify them. But as you go, you start kind of maybe wishing you'd adopted some kind of naming pattern or had a way to group like business domain things together. And so this grouping will allow you to introduce namespaces into workflows and entities the way that you do with tokens. And it'll be universal across all of them. And so, for example, we're doing a Remember Me. I could have a Remember Me namespace, and all my Remember Me related workflows and entities and things would live in there. And I can filter, search, sort these things, essentially group them there and find them very easily. Workflows becoming not just handy, but an absolute must-have. You'll see in our hands-on part today where how unruly things would be without workflows, and so they're kind of becoming just a table stakes item, and a really handy way to access workflows and their outputs would be if you could execute them as a token and use their outputs wherever you like, to pass into other workflows, to use on condition statements, to have generate maybe HTML or output for you that you can put on a page. And so the workflow can have all the logic and go and build and figure out some really pretty nice UI to show, for example, and then you just plunk that token on a page. Everything runs, your output is there. So that's coming. Those are kind of the two major features that we're working on in this release. We've set about half of our capacity aside in 1.14 though, and we want to make sure that we're addressing kind of things that you all are encountering, feedback you're giving us. So small enhancements and fixes, particularly focused on continuing to tame the date time field and date time in general as a concept. I think it's very powerful, and we, under the hood, do some really great things with the way we handle it and process it. Universal times, things that can span across time zones and adjust time. It's just a little bit technical, a little too technical, I think, and we're getting in the way of ourselves a little bit. So we're lots on the table there, as we don't just plug holes, but think about what's a better experience. How can we make this easier to work with? And so that's kind of the key stuff going on. Last thing I'll touch on there is that DNN has come out with 991. And so everything we're doing and primarily testing is against 991 to ensure that everything we can certify compatibility there. So with that said, I wanted to jump on into the hands-on. I have a special sidekick and guest with me today. Manuel, aka Manu Kuduru. He is our lead quality engineer and does all kinds of testing and works very closely with me on the releases to make sure that we're always shipping a quality and as bug-free product as possible. But he's always got his thinking cap on, and he kind of goes beyond just the, okay, does it do what we said it would do, and he always finds a way to break me. And so we really appreciate that he's got that good eye. But, when you're testing individual components, you don't get to do a lot of comprehensive building. So I tapped him to help me with this one today. And it was a really great eye-opening partnership. And it was a good chance for us to really feel the product. One of the reasons, and I'm sometimes maybe a sucker for punishment signing up for these, but they don't always go my way. But I stay really close to the product, and I taste and feel what you all taste and feel. And it really helps us make a better product, end-to-end overall experience. And so Manu did a really great job with me. And so what is the with me? Well, as the title says, it's all about remember me. And you see this plenty of times in systems across the board, right? Whether it is kind of a built-in feature of the standard login of DNN, and you check that box, and a lot of times people aren't sure, what does that actually do? That's been a running mystery for me for many versions of DNN. And sometimes it will just auto fill in the username and password. Your credit card company, sometimes some of these more secure sites will allow you to have easier access to get in. Sometimes you've set that and you've said to remember me, and all it's really doing, as we kind of live in a world now where security and fraud prevention and things are more and more important, they use that setting from you to store some information, and they can look and say, okay, I'm still going to make you put your username and password in, but I'm going to trust that it's actually you because you've signaled to me that I can do that and I can remember you. It doesn't mean I'm signing you in. It just means I'm maybe not going to challenge you with a text message or using an authenticator app or something for a time frame. And so it kind of, when we first came up with this idea, it seemed really lightweight and simple. But the hardest part was kind of getting our heads wrapped around, well, what does remember me mean here? And so kind of scoped it down. And for the purposes here, there's a few assumptions. One is that in this application, my users are not like the general public, right? These are kind of the people that are more privileged to use the system could be the developer roles, could be the manager roles, people that are maintaining, working inside, back of the house type stuff. They're primarily working on their own computer and they're not sharing. And so they want that convenience of, hey, it's me. When I come here, just sign me on in, right? We wanted to, so just kind of automatically let them set it and forget it and let things happen for them. We want to make sure that though that this is secure, and we'll touch on a little bit what secure means. And some of it is that someone else couldn't come along and grab some codes or breadcrumbs that we've left behind to help enable all of this and put that into maybe their browser, their machine, and then gain access as this user, right? We wanted to also leave an audit trail behind, so we know that you know, as this works across different devices for a user. So I may be on my mobile or tablet, I'm on a different computer that I have, I'm at the office versus at home. I can make use of this, but I want to make sure that we know all the places this person has signaled that they want to be able to gain access from. We want to have a timeout. This shouldn't last forever. And so, you know, we picked 30 days, and I'll show how we can make that adjustable. But, you know, it's kind of not just remember me for to the end of time, but remember me for, in this case, the next 30 days. And after that, I'll be prompted to kind of restate that I want another 30 days of this feature. But sometimes 30 days isn't enough. Sometimes someone maybe gains access to your site, or you're worried, or someone leaves the company, any number of reasons that you would not want to be remembered, but in fact, you would want to be forgotten. And so we want to have a forget me feature and kind of touched on that history. So some things that were a little bit out of scope, and I really think that this ended up being one of the best things that we've done as far as demonstrating some really cool capabilities. And I'd like to do a round 2 with it. And in the round 2, and some things that kind of out of scope for today, there's just only so much we can also fit into you know, half an hour or so. And so things like, well, is it all black and white? I remember you and log you in, but what if, since I am keeping a history and I know about you and where you were signing in from and other things, what if I notice that something seems awry? And we'll touch on what some of those things are here as we're demoing and kind of looking at how it was built. But what if I want to, you know, it's not either log you in or deny you, but what if I want to step it up and challenge you, right? Maybe I want you to have to sign in one time, or I want to send you a code in an email or a text message, or even cooler is use like one of the authenticator applications. The Google Authenticator in particular is one that has an open API and is pretty straightforward to work with. And you pull this app up, when you've got it set up per a site, it rotates a code every 30 seconds or so. And to be able to prompt the user and say, hey, need a little more from you, put that code in that's in your Authenticator app, maybe give them a choice of what they want to do. And I'm sure we all run into this on our bank websites, and more, it's not just one level of challenge or multi-factor, second factor authentication, but you have some choices. Do you want a phone call? Do you want an email? Do you want to answer a question? Whatever, but need some way to know that it's time to do that, right? Don't want to burden the user with it if it's not necessary. If I know that, hey, it's you right where I see you always coming in from, and everything looks the way it did the last 10 times that you've signed in, I don't need to challenge you, right? But if I see something fishy, like you're signing in from Russia and you're located in the Midwest of the United States, want to make sure you're not on vacation or something here. And so why don't I make sure this is you and ask you for something that only you would have access to or know. So we'll do things like that. Also want to let the user see, hey, where are all the places that I have logged in from, that I am remembered from? Maybe send them an email that says, hey, just letting you know that you had signed in from this other location, things like that come along the way. But before we can get to those things, we had to have the kind of happy path fundamentals, right? The ability to signal that you want to be remembered, the ability to be remembered and logged in automatically, and the ability to be forgotten. And so that's the 3 main areas that we built today. In order to do this, and this is the part I'm excited about, we touched on some features that are, and like a lot of things in Plantain app, there's so many goodies in there that you maybe just haven't crossed paths with, or you've seen and always wondered, like, what is this? I don't know. So I'm not going to use it. And so some of these are things like being able to work with cookies, being able to encrypt information and decrypt information using very high grade and highly secure encryption algorithms. In the case of what we're showing today, it'll be the RSA encryption. Leveraging a feature that's inside of Forms, which is device fingerprinting, being able to look at, and this happens all over the internet on all kinds of sites you're using, you have this capability as well, which is to say, look, let me take the combination of various factors, what browser you're on, what computer you're on, maybe your IP address. It can get really granular. What fonts do you have installed on your machine? Even. And let me take the combination of these and generate kind of a unique fingerprint that I can then use to identify you without having to really know who you are as a user, any kind of personal information. And so this device fingerprinting can be and is, especially when it's for security purposes and fraud prevention purposes, GDPR compliant. And things like that. So very, very powerful feature. And it's the kind of cornerstone of what we're going to be leveraging to make all of this magic work today. Being able to log someone in automatically without having to go and look up their password and expose that password and kind of get in deeper than you should. And even if you can do those things, there's a lot of steps involved. It can be messy and it can expose a lot of security. And so there's an auto login URL action that we leverage here to kind of securely, one time with a very tight window, the window that we're going to be using it in, basically just generate a URL that we send the user to. The moment they hit it, it signs them in and they're in, and then that URL no longer is valid. It's consumed until the next time one is needed. And, you know, especially like with this encryption and some of these things, it gets, as much as we're wanting this to be secure, at some point, there's always a key to the kingdom, right? And you need somewhere to put that key to the kingdom that it's not just sitting out there in the wild. And so there's some options there. And this one, as we kind of go, and I'll touch on this once we get into things, exposed a little bit of an opportunity where we do have a kind of a vault and the connectors use it. You can access it. I think it's missing the ability to put in user-defined values. And so for me, this exercise exposed, and that's a feature I want us to, I think we can knock out pretty quick and maybe in the next release. But to be able to allow you to have somewhere safe to put very, very sensitive information and retrieve that information. Now, if you are a very privileged user in the system, you do have a place for that right now, and it's in your web config. And you can put some app setting keys in there. A lot of the kind of overall workings of the platform are leveraging some of these keys. Your database credentials and things like that are already in there. Well, you can make use of that and put some of your own keys in, and I'll show you how you can fetch those out using tokens. And then, you know, these are all kind of building blocks, but when you go to put all this together, as simple as this sounds, I know I've probably talked it up a lot, but we're really just, hey, I want the user to check a box and say, remember me. And I want to, next time I see them, if I remember them, sign them in, right? But there's a lot of moving pieces here and a lot of things that can go wrong or need to be respected. And kind of as we came across that, we found and leveraged some really good practices in workflows and patterns for not having to do the same thing over and over everywhere. And then if something changes, like the key for our RSA encryption, having to go to 15 places and then update and change that there as well. So kind of without further ado, Dale, if you can keep me honest, I'm gonna come at this differently a little bit than normally. I want to actually just demonstrate this and how it works, and then we'll get under the hood and see how it was built. So are you seeing a login screen right now? I'm making sure I've shared my full window, or is it still a presentation? Okay, let me, if I may, stop the share.
I was trying to figure out how I was going to keep you honest.
It's a full-time job. All right, now I believe you're seeing my entire everything.
Yep.
So now are you seeing login screen?
I do.
Great. So one of the other things, by the way, and I'd mentioned it, is we want this to work across browsers. And so in this case, and I want to show, I'm in a Chrome incognito window here. I also have up Microsoft Edge and Firefox, and we're gonna test all three of them. Let me get my presentation out of the way so that these are easy to get to. Okay, so first one I'll do is just Chrome, and it's pretty simple. I've got a user set up. I've never signed in before. Where? So another little thing I'd mentioned is that if I don't want to leverage this feature, I also want regular old sign-in to work, right? So I'm going to log in, I'm in, and it's showing me here on the home page of the application, I'm logged in as someone named some user, right? And I'm going to go ahead and sign out, and we'll see that when I go to the login page, I am back to 0 and blank, right? And it doesn't know me from Adam. My Chrome, of course, remembers me, but we'll see in the other browsers that I'm not so remembered. And so I'm going to log in again, but this time I'm going to say, remember me for 30 days. And I put a little disclaimer here, right? And this is something that you know, if you leverage a feature like this, you want to make sure that your user knows. Only set this if you're the only user of this device. Never set it in a shared or public environment, kind of the disclaimer, right? Because the last thing you want is the next person that comes up behind you in an office or a kiosk or something like that, internet cafe, if those are still a thing, to come to the same site and be signed in as you, right? And so now what's going to happen is I'm going to log in because I put my username and password in, but the system is going to remember me. And the next time that I come to log in, I'm going to be automatically logged in. So I'm in, I'm signed in as some user. I'm going to sign out. I'm on the home page, but I'm going to go back to the login page. And when I do, you'll see that I'm only there for a moment because I'm going to end back up at the home page and I'm signed back in as some user. And so what has happened then is that the system somehow was able to remember me, was able to see that I want to be remembered, and determined that when I hit the login page, I really am me. So go ahead and sign me in. And we can see that, I'm going to refresh, this is now Microsoft Edge.
And your password is 123456, right?
Oh, come on, Dale. This is modern times. 789. So I'm now going to signal to be remembered. As you see, I hit this page. I was not remembered. Log in. I log out. I go to the login page. I'm back in. Okay. Now I'm on Firefox. I have logged in twice now on 2 different browsers on the same computer. I'm going to refresh the login page. It does not know me. It's not remembering me. It's not taking any action on my behalf. Sign in. It lets me know that I'm logged in. I sign out. I go back to login. And I'm in, okay? So now I'm remembered on all the devices. And I'm gonna go ahead and show like, well, what is happening here? And the first little part I wanna show is if you were to pull up the inspector, and all the browsers have this, if you go to application, you'll notice that there is a section called cookies. And cookies are kind of in use everywhere. If I sort my cookies, you'll see that I've got 3 cookies on here. One is just called Remember Me, and it's now set to true, okay? There's a Remember Me user, and there's a Remember Me fingerprint. Now, while the true is readable, these 2 things are big, long strings of gibberish, right? That is because they're encrypted. Another thing you'll notice is that my Remember Me user entry, as well as the Remember Me, have an expiration date. And today is the 28th of April. they expire, and like as I said, remember me for 30 days. They expire on the 28th of May. And so if and we can play with this a little bit, and if I tune this down or something, and I make it basically when this cookie expires, the way browsers handle expired cookies is to basically delete them the moment they encounter them. And so if I were to regenerate this cookie and put an expiration date of yesterday on it, for example, what you would see is it would pop in here momentarily and then it would disappear. So that's one of the mechanisms that we're using. I could have put another cookie in and put an expiration date in and then did all this checking and stuff to see like, well, is it like past the expiration date and stuff? I didn't even have to do that because I was also able to set an expiration date on my cookie, and I will just basically remember me will not exist and not be true anymore on the 28th of May at this time, essentially. So let's take a look at these cookies for a minute. I'm going to sign out. And actually, so I'm going to sign back in for a minute. And let's run over to my profile page. And what I've added to the profile page is a forget me on this device and a forget me everywhere. So for now, I'm going to forget me on this device only. And what you'll see happen is when I push that button, these cookies are going to disappear. And I can zoom in a little bit here just to make this easier to read. And so, hey, you have been forgotten, and all my remember me cookies are gone. The next time now that I sign out and I go to sign in, you'll see that I am basically prompted to log in again, okay? And so I have also the ability here to do that same forget me on this device. Now you can see if I go over to like my Microsoft Edge and I sign out and I go to sign in again, and I'll inspect here, and let's go to application, and we have, zoom in a little bit, you'll see that I still have my remember me cookies and they're set. And the moment I say to go, I'm logged back in, right? So I was only forgotten on that device because the cookies were cleared only from that device. So you kind of have the gist. This is how it works. This is what we've built. There's a lot more we can do with this now that we have these ingredients, but let's take a look at a few things that are under the hood. So I'm now logged in as my kind of super user developer account. I'm me, not some user over here, because the other one was an incognito window of Chrome. Couple things that we can see right out of the gates is that one of the things that was happening that wasn't transparent to the user yet, and this would be like a phase 2 type thing, is we're not just handling all of this through cookies. Whoops, not audit logs. Through login detail. So every time that I was signing in, and let's kind of sort up here with the newest stuff. So you can see I have 3 entries here. This was me on Firefox. This was me on Chrome, and it's going to say Chrome again. That's because Microsoft Edge is actually Chrome engine. What you'll notice though that's different between these, so it knows where I'm at, it's got my IP logged, it knows, in this case it doesn't know my OS, I guess I'm on a Mac and it didn't detect that well. It doesn't know that I was on a mobile or not. Well, it doesn't know what mobile device, and that's because I'm not on a mobile device, right? Had I been on like on an iPad or my phone or something, it would have picked up at least that I was on mobile. And you can see that I've stored the expiration date in here. I know when it was created, and I've also got this field that says is active is true. So remember we had that button that said forget me everywhere. And if I go here where I'm signed in and I go back to my profile and I say forget me everywhere, and it says you were forgotten on 3 devices. And we come back here and we refresh, you'll see that my is active is no longer true. Okay, and the reason for this, couple of things of, well, if I had it all working in cookies, why didn't I keep using just the cookie? Well, one is that these other devices that I may be signed in on, or someone has compromised my account and signed in as me, right? And maybe in our round 2 or phase 2 of this, we send an email to the user that says, hey, cool, just giving you a heads up, you have signed in and set or asked to be remembered for 30 days on this device, this IP address. So I've got these goodies and I've set the stage for that to be able to send some information. And hey, if this wasn't you, you need to go and kind of change your password and be forgotten, right? Because maybe you've been compromised. If it was you, nothing more to do here, just a friendly notification. And we see that pattern a lot with our, like I said, our banks, our credit cards. More and more sites are doing this. They make it convenient, but we want to make sure that we're aware and in control of what's happening behind the scene. And so this is false. And when we get into the logic and look at what we built, we don't just rely on the cookie. And you'll notice that this device fingerprint, if you remember when I was looking at the cookie, it was a really long string of gibberish, as well as like my username was stored in there. It was that was because it was encrypted. Here, I'm not storing it encrypted, right? And so what we do in our workflow, as we'll kind of see, is we grab those cookies with the encrypted values and we pass them into some workflows that handle a lot of this logic and figuring of things out. And one of the first things they do with that is that they decrypt that fingerprint for us. So the nice thing is we're not, if someone's sniffing on the wire, if someone's sniffing and looking at the cookies, they're not going to see the actual fingerprint, the actual username, right? That happens once the system has handed it off to itself in the back end. But here, I mean, if someone's in and, but you could see your own fingerprints, and we could have encrypted it here and decrypted it on demand. Didn't feel like there was a need for that, especially for this demo. And so the fingerprints are being stored. So we've kind of talked a lot about fingerprints and things like that. Let's kind of jump into our login form, and let's take it. And so this is the login form. This is the standard login form that Plantain App ships with. And all we did was a little bit of surgery here, right? So one thing we did was we added just a checkbox, and it's the Remember Me. And it's how the user can signal to the system when the button is pushed that we want to actually execute the Remember Me, like actually remember me, not remember and sign me in, but go ahead and put an entry in, make the cookies for me, get me set up so that I'm remembered. Almost think of it as remember me for next time in the next 30 days. It's basically just a checkbox. You'll notice that one little thing about it here is that the words that we saw was remember me for 30 days, but I've got this tokenized and parameterized so that I could turn this down to remember me for 7 days, 5 days, 1 day. So while I'm building, while I'm testing, I don't have to wait 30 days. I have not hard coded this value, and I figured why not leverage it here and show the user. So one kind of a pro tip, you can use tokens in your labels of your form fields. The other part was that little eye that we saw when I hovered and it popped up. Anything I put into short description, when I have tooltips enabled inside of my configuration, some of this stuff, some of you may know, others first time seeing it, so I'm just going to touch. If you have this show tooltips enabled, anything you put in short description is going to give you that little popover, so you can give some guidance or additional information to users without cluttering up your form, right? And so the real kind of two things that's happening, and we're going to walk first the path of being remembered, and then we'll walk the path of being automatically logged in, right? So on the login button, all I've really done, normally what you'll see is that there's 3 actions that were already there, already happening. Log the user in with the credentials that they've provided. So this is already here. And redirecting you to a URL, one of 2 things. You're either visiting the page clean and fresh in your first time, or you maybe had bookmarked a page or you timed out in your session. So that's one of the real handy things about this Remember Me, right? I went away for 15, 20 minutes. I was on a page, I was working, all my parameters, everything was set up. Now I've timed out and I need to log in again. The system handles this for you. Cool, I'm gonna log you in, and then I'll put you back on the place where you were. And I do that by having something in the query string called a return URL. So all these 2 actions are already doing in your login form is just saying, if they have a return URL, send them there after they've successfully logged in. If they don't have a return URL, take them essentially to whatever the home page of the I don't mean by name home, but the page that's been designated in the system as the starting page. And I'll just take you there. So what we've done is we've got a workflow that we've made, and it's called execute, so we're executing this workflow, remember me new. And I've kind of commented things up here along the way so we can, one, know for ourselves what we've done, but it makes it easier to follow along. So if the user has checked the remember me box, execute the workflow to enable the setting. I do this after they've logged in successfully, right? They said, remember me, they gave me a good username and password. I now have their user credentials as a signed in user that I can leverage. And so all this workflow takes in to do all kinds of cool stuff is two things. One is their signed in user ID as a token. So this token will say for whatever user that's signed in, here's the ID. And then you'll see there's a token or a field on the form called device fingerprint. So let's go up and take a look at what device fingerprint is. And this is a field that you can add, I believe, under security. Pardon the scrolling. I just want to show you where it's at. So under security field types, there's a field here called device fingerprint. And all this really does is it enables a tool that can take fingerprinting. Now, this fingerprinting can, as I kind of mentioned, can get very, very granular, too granular, right? And what we don't want to have happening is that if any little thing changed about, and this, for example, happens to me with one of my credit card companies, where I do use the Remember Me, and it feels like if I don't go there every other day, it's basically going, hey, we think we see you on a new device or a device we haven't seen before. And it could be something as simple as I have a new plugin I'm running. I don't know what, I've changed my screen resolution. It just seems to never actually remember me unless it's like the current day I'm in, right? And I think they have their settings maybe, and they're a credit card company, so that's their prerogative, better safe than sorry, but they maybe have it tuned too tight. So we've excluded a lot of these settings. You can see that there is a link that takes you to more information, so you can read about these and explore them. There's different nuances on some of these, whether you're on a tablet or not. Certain browsers don't allow access to these and do, but we found that what has held up over the course of a week or more, because when we were first putting and playing with this as an idea to do for this low-code cafe, I was finding that I'd come back the next day and my fingerprint had changed, and suddenly I was not being seen as the me that was stored off in the login details table and in the cookie, right? So suddenly causing a need for like a challenge. It's great that you want to be remembered. Yeah, I know like what I can use to log you in, but when I fingerprint your system right now, not yesterday or last week, you have a different fingerprint than what's supposed to be associated with this user on this device. And so we turned off a lot of things, and all we're really not excluding. So this isn't a what do I want to include? It includes everything by default. Very, very granular fingerprint would probably change every hour if you had everything turned on and we're just using your system. The things we wanted, user agent is like, what browser am I? What language am I? What time zone am I in essentially? Where am I locale-wise, right? My CPU is a really great thing. It doesn't change often, right? Unless I've upgraded my machine. Doesn't usually happen every 30 days. The platform that I'm running on, which is essentially my OS. Some things about my graphics card and whether there's some protections and things around OS tampering and people trying to fool, so I didn't want that to be excluded. So just knowing what machine, what where you are, and what browser you're on, and like some things kind of, again, specific to your machine and browser, and where you are good fingerprint. Remember, we've already quantified with the user that this is something like, you've already said, hey, look, this is my computer. This is me. I use this every day, all day, no one else. So it's okay, right? It's theoretical that someone else with an identical laptop as me, same browser as me, in the same network as me, would have the same fingerprint as me, right? So you can tune this, but we could say, like, getting into what fonts are installed or browser plugins. We could turn on some of these other things, the things about the RAM that I have, whatever. and get more detailed. But for this seems to work really well and is still unique. I've not been able to, across different browsers or with other people trying it on the same network, generate the same token as me. So that's this device fingerprint. This is the ID of it. And that's what we're passing into this workflow here that we execute. So let's take a look at what this workflow does. So the workflow we were looking at, and just kind of now you're getting the first look at, just to do this one feature, and I'm kind of giving the plug for the grouping and the namespace that's coming. You know, I've probably got 10 different workflows that all it's doing is handling this Remember Me. Now, I like to make building blocks, and a lot of these workflows are reusable. So it's not like, holy cow, this is too big and hairy for me to get into because I don't want to make 10 workflows and all this stuff. I've got a workflow for handling RSA encryption and decryption. I can reuse this. It's already been really valuable in this feature implementation, but I can use it in other areas of my application. Being able to set cookies, being able to clear cookies. I almost made these workflows, they're like little helpers, right? That I can utilize rather than putting that logic hard into my specific Remember Me flows. So, but as you can see, there's several. So this Remember Me New is the one that we're passing off to. And if we take a look at it, you'll see it takes in a user as a number. It's a user ID, which I have because I'm getting it after they've logged in. And I'm taking the fingerprint. This would be their current fingerprint off the device, not anything that's been saved yet, because that's what we're doing here, right? And so I take that user ID and I go and get other information. I do a read user action. Pretty standard here, and I just say, hey, go read me this user. New feature that went in at 113. Normally, only very privileged users could read here, but I've overridden the built-in security. I have very firm control over when this workflow is getting called and by whom. And so I said, it's okay, go ahead and take that user ID that was passed in for the current user and go get me the rest of the information about this user because I want to use it, right? And all I do is I create a new login detail record. So that was the login details that we're seeing. I'm saying I want to put a new entry in here, okay? And I put that entry in. If it's successful, so any of these actions where you are creating a new entry into one of your entities, you always have the ability to specify an output token. So here I've specified something called new detail, right? I put all these things in, and you'll notice, again, kind of part of the theme of this one is a lot of handy features that are there and you maybe just didn't realize, but there are tokens for working with browser and detecting. And cool thing is they're working back here in the backend workflows. I didn't have to do any of this on my form, but what browser am I? Am I on a mobile device? You can look up in tokens. If you just type browser into the search, you'll see this token and all of the different flavors. There's a ton of cool stuff. There's another token called free geo IP that gives you the country name, the city, your IP address, and things like that. In this case, also the user's IP when they're logged in from that last action is there for me as well. So I've kind of used a combination of a few different things. I've got my fingerprint. I've got, hey, who is this user's email? What's their actual ID again? What's their IP address? I've leveraged some handy tokens. And now I have a pretty decent little profile that I've built up about the user, and I'm sticking that in, and I'm going ahead and I'm saying, this is active. They're just now telling me I want to be remembered for 30 days. So I take this, yes, 5-minute mark.
I'm going to keep you honest for the 5-minute warning here.
Okay. So we're gonna cruise a little bit here, and so I've got this new detail, and all I do is I say if it actually worked, I successfully put it in. So my ID for the record is higher than 0, right? It means that this entry went in successfully. Go ahead and call my workflow that sets cookies, and all this does is it goes ahead and sets those 3 cookies up onto my machine. Inside of that set cookies workflow, I'm doing the RSA encryption. So that I encrypt the device fingerprint, I encrypt the user's username, and then I'm putting that in, and I always kind of signal to myself with some tokens so that the workflow can answer back that things went well, Okay, so if we go back to our, now if I didn't create that record, I will signal back a response that says, hey, I log an error, and I basically send back here and I'm saying something didn't go right, and I can then show that on my login form. So I call this workflow, and I can show the result back to the user that this didn't go well. We also have a forget me on this device button, and all it's doing is executing a workflow that clears the cookies and then shows a message to the user that says that that happened. And so now I've set tokens and things like that and the cookies, and I know this now. So the next time the user comes in, how are we logging them in? Let's pop over here. And where we're handling this is not on the form buttons or anything like that. You've got these form events, right? Several of these are already here. These really apply to logged in users and kind of not letting them hang out on a login page if they're already logged in and they're not a developer or a privileged user. So nothing to see here. Really on initialization of the form. And it's basically saying after the form is loaded, all the fields are set, you've got all your data ready to work with, the form is good to go. Is there anything you want me to do? And what we've done here is we've, one, said, let's go fetch. So if you use a token called cookie, it's saying go look and fetch the value of a cookie called remember me. Now remember, we didn't encrypt this one, so it's just true or false. And we're going to set it into a little output token name so we can use this. And what we do on the next action here, and this was really the only other thing we put in, was to say, hey, if essentially I have a cookie and it's remember me and it's true, which means somewhere along the way this user said they wanted to be remembered, time to go and see if we should remember them and log them in. So we run a workflow that all it does is similar actions that we did here. It just goes and it gets those other cookies, but it gets the other cookies, and remember, they're encrypted. So we'll take a look over here real quick at how this works. I'm just going to show the logic, but we can see the encryption and the decryption. So I get the cookies. I then run another workflow that actually says, okay, go ahead and pass into me, your current fingerprint, the cookie fingerprint, that's what's encrypted and stored there, the username, and if there was anywhere the user, maybe they timed out or something, that I'm supposed to redirect you to, right? So that you saw me demoing, like it remembers me and it was always taking me to the home page. But if I was in a situation where I was on another page and I timed out and I landed on that login box, I'm going to be shot right back into where I was and what I was doing. And so let's take a look at that workflow, and it's kind of the magic workflow that handles the world. So that is the Initialize Remember Me. And so this one is basically running a workflow that I made to, it takes in, and I know we're pretty much at time here, it takes in the current fingerprint, the cookie fingerprint. So this is encrypted when it comes in, it's required, and what user it is. And all it's doing is it's decrypting this, and then it's going and looking up. So I'm not just going, but I'm actually saying, let me query my user table and make sure this and get the info about this user and that they're good. Let me go and hit the login details entity and see for this device fingerprint, for this user, do I have an active? So remember, when we say forget me everywhere, it sets everything to false, right? And so if I said forget me everywhere, I would fail this step, not error out, but I wouldn't have any records. And so the system comes here and determines, hey, if I've got any active, valid remember me's that match up, go ahead and figure out what action to take. Log them in or potentially challenge them. And maybe next week or another time, we can kind of carry forward here and take a look at where we'll make use of that. If I don't have a valid login action, right? They were remembered at some point, but it either timed out, expired, they've said forget me. I'm basically gonna clear all these cookies off their machine, and I'm going to give them a message that I return back that would say, hey, the login action is force them to log in, and give them a payload back that says, hey, sorry, I couldn't auto log you in. You need to go ahead and log in. And so this is handled through workflows, and you can see that there's a lot to kind of unpack here. I can make these workflows available. We can take a round 2 another time, but we are at time.
And that was the exact question. There was a lot going on here, and some things we didn't get to see due to time. Anyway, to get the workflows and forms exported so we can install and utilize. So I guess that's a question. But it sounds again like this marketplace that we banter about, that this would be a great place to be able to incorporate that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we'll take it offline after and see if we want to kind of explore a little deeper on this one and show that multi-factor authentication. Either way, we've got something really, really great here built, and I think what we'll do is make a video for the YouTube channel that chopped up so it's on point, but walks you through these. We'll export all these workflows out of here, make them available, and we'll give you the steps to create. I mean, it's only 2 entities. One entity really that you need to make all this work, and it's an export of a form, and it's the existing form you have. So this one lends itself very, very well to a video and a sharing of some workflows and an import of some form values. So I think that's a really great idea, and we'll do that.
Well, perfect. We thank you for everyone that attended today. We hope you got value out of that. And Reza, thank you, and Manu for putting that together. As always, please take a look at the feedback form that follows this. We'd love to have your feedback, hear what we did right, and what we can do better next time. We hope to see you again next week. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.